Hi, so today I wanted to try something really interesting. What I have here is my stock Fender Princeton Reverb Reissue, the 65. Um, I've seen a lot of questions on forums all over the internet about how the stock Princeton compares to a vintage one. And I don't have a vintage Princeton, but I wanted to see how close we could get by adding some RCA tubes all across and changing the stock speaker to the Eminence GA10, I believe. It's supposed to come very close to the vintage Jensen C10N that was commonly found in the Princeton Reverbs back then in 1965 and you know, during that era. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to compare the amp just completely stock, and then with the stock speaker, stock tubes, everything, and then I'm going to add the RCA tubes in, and then there's going to be a comparison of how those compare the old tubes and then the new stock tubes that come with the amp and how it changes with the amp. So you're going to see me mess with the effects too, the reverb and the tremolo. The speed of the tremolo is going to stay the same. I'm going to keep it at 3. The intensity is what I'm going to be moving more. And the reverb, of course, I'm going to be messing with that. The EQ, I'm going to keep the treble at 7, the bass at 4, and I'm going to keep the volume at 4 when I'm doing the clean sounds. And then later, when I crank the amp up, I'm going to keep it in my closet because I can't crank this amp right next to me or else it's going to blow my ears away. It's really loud. But I wanted to see how we could capture the sounds of the power tubes overdriving, so I wanted to crank the amp instead of adding an overdrive pedal. And we're going to see how it compares. And later, once I do that, I'm going to add the Eminence at the end, and we're going to compare how the old tubes with the Jensen and then with the Eminence sound. Maybe it'll be an upgrade. Maybe it won't be an upgrade. Maybe overall it won't make much of a difference. Maybe it will make the amp sound worse. It's just a couple of questions I want to have answered for myself and for maybe anybody who's curious about this. So let's go ahead and get started. Well, I hope you guys found this video informative. My conclusion on all of this, my opinion, is that the stock tubes are definitely something you want to change. The RCA tubes that I added made a difference to me. It removed some muddiness that was present with the stock tubes. It's almost like if you're an audio engineer and when you're mixing tracks, usually you remove the muddiness in order to bring up the clarity of the track. That's sort of what it felt like in a physical, I guess in an actual physical sense, is that with the stock tubes you have this muddiness that's on the amp. It's not really present unless you won't notice it unless you actually change the tubes. You might notice that some clarity was brought up and some muddiness was brought down. The low end was tightened up, in my opinion. So I would recommend changing the tubes, and I wouldn't necessarily say go straight to the old vintage tubes like RCA, because they can get pretty expensive. RCA like tubes, changing the whole tube layout on this amp probably cost me another $350 for the rectifier, the matched power tubes, the 3 12AX7s and the 12AT7 ran me about $350. Is it an investment? I think so. In the long run, they say that the old stock tubes are supposed to last a lot longer than the cheap tubes that come in most amps these days. So maybe it's an investment that we should be willing to make, I guess, if we want to have our Princeton or any amp in particular to last for the long run. The speaker though, the stock speaker on this amp, the Jensen speaker, I find to be very, it works. I think it's suitable for the application. I think it's almost just not necessary to upgrade the speaker unless you're looking for a distinct particular sound. The Eminence sounds good. The only drawback with the Eminence is that it takes away a little bit of the high end, but it adds a little bit of low mids, so it gives it a little bit of like, body to the amp, and it's a little bit more responsive to my playing, I've noticed, or at least that's just how it feels, maybe because the low mids are brought up. But that's not to say that the Jensen is a bad speaker, because I actually think it excels at what it's supposed to do and what it's meant to do with this amp. I would just say keep the speaker. Don't waste some money on upgrading the speaker if you want the classic Fender sound, and probably invest in upgrading the tubes. I found this to be a very interesting experiment. I'm actually very curious to see what would happen with the 68 custom Princeton Reverb. I used to own one, but I never upgraded the speaker or the tubes. And now that I'm finding out how much of a difference the tubes make, I'm very curious to see what would happen if I got a 68 Princeton custom and I upgraded the tubes. Would it bring up some clarity? Because a lot of the complaints with that amp was that it was muddy. It just felt like there was a blanket over it. And of course, the EQ on that amp is a little bit different than the stock Princeton, but I feel like with some upgraded tubes, that amp would be amazing. I'm very curious to try that out one day, but that will be for another video. I hope you guys found this informative. I wanted to answer a couple of questions that some people may have. I always see people saying that they want to know what the difference between just having the stock tubes and then upgraded tubes, and then maybe the difference between the Eminence speaker and the Jensen. I wanted to do it all in one video. So that's it for now, and I will see you guys in the next video.